Hey everyone, and welcome back to Timeless. Today we're going to be making a tutorial going over sideboard mapping. Sideboard mapping is the process by which you would take a deck and its sideboard and refine it for tournament play or a specific metagame. An example of sideboard mapping would be, for example, to look over your list and say, well, I have a bunch of removal spells like Static Discharge. These cards are bad versus combo, and combo is a tough matchup. Therefore, I need enough cards like Thoughtseize to come in order to cover them. But actually, combo is a really bad matchup, so I need more cards to cut. And then you go through your list and then you decide what does and doesn't make the cut in specific matchups. It helps you refine which cards should actually be in your starting 60, which cards belong in your sideboard, what comes in when, and it ensures you don't have cases where you're playing bad cards in matchups where they really shouldn't be played. It makes sure you don't have cases where you're overboarding, meaning where you bring in too much sideboard cards and then you end up cutting like really core cards like Guide of Souls and then you start losing games because your deck just became really slow. So we're going to teach you how to do this properly, and I think the best way to do it is to actually just do it together. Let's jump into the spreadsheet. To start out, I went ahead and listed every single card that's in my current build of Mardu, and I split it up into cards that are core, meaning cards that are never ever going to get cut, no matter what. Cards that are flexible, meaning that we could cut them if we get a really bad matchup for them, and I like to put interaction in its own separate pile, though interaction is considered flexible. I think that for a deck like Energy, especially where you're trying to be fair and interactive, you should list your interaction separately so that you can make sure that you actually have enough of it for each individual matchup. And then I have a tally up here, just making sure that we add up to 60. And since we have 60 cards plus Luris, we have room for 14 sideboard cards. And we haven't decided what sideboard cards we're going to have yet. We are just allowed to have 74. And to go ahead and start off here, let's go ahead and make a column for our main deck. In our main deck, we're just going to copy over these numbers. That's simple. And then over here, we can actually copy over this sum as well, just to make sure that we're at 60 cards once again. And then what I like to do in this row is that, yep, I like to sum up that, except let's make that go just a little lower because we're going to add more cards to the bottom. We've messed up our sum over here, so subtract that, and now you're ready to spreadsheet. So this number here, I like to bold and italics it because I'm playing an interactive deck. I need to make sure I have enough interaction to properly participate in the metagame. 12, I think, is the minimum. When we're playing against specific decks, especially combo decks, I actually want to see this number go up. I really do not want to see this number go down unless we're playing against something that's really uninteractive where we're just trying to goldfish them. But that's actually not how Energy works. Generally, you are trying to play the interaction. Also, as for my main deck, this is kind of the new build of Energy for post-strip mine meta. It might seem really weird that I'm playing 4 Deathrite Shaman and 22 lands. This deck traditionally hasn't played Shaman, and it's traditionally played only 20 or 21 lands if you're playing Lures. But Strip Mine is putting a lot of pressure on us. Mardu is not as good at leveraging Strip Mine as some of the other Strip Mine decks in the format, such as Golgari Midrange, which we can go ahead and tech for first. Therefore, I just decided we're not going to play Strip Mine in this deck, just because if we get into like a matchup against Golgari or any other deck that can actually abuse Strip Mine better than us, it's going to be a really bad time. If we're stripping each other, like they win the game. And I don't want to be in that situation. And Strip Mine is very good against combo, but that's already our good matchup. We already are able to run the interaction for combo. So what I like to do is I like to name specific matchups that I want to go ahead and make this for. So Golgari definitely is really big on ladder right now. Let's also make Dark Ritual combo just generically, right? We don't need to name a specific deck. A lot of these decks will play similarly where they're playing Dark Ritual, Grief, Discard, that sort of thing. And they're trying to do some sort of an unfair win. Sometimes do Sorin Alenda. With Show and Tell over here, we can put Fair Blue decks. So these are your highly interactive counterspell decks. The current meta way to build these is to play like Tamiyo, Hydroponics Engineer, those guys. And then let's do one more slot for the mirror match. I think 5 decks is a pretty good scope for this. If I were doing this for real and not live in a video, I would maybe keep going to 10 decks. And what's really cool is you can actually just keep expanding this spreadsheet as you make it. All right, so what we're going to want to do is we're going to look at these colors that I made down here, and we're going to start like color coding all of the cards outside of core because we are never going to cut these, and saying whether or not they are bad in a matchup. So let's go ahead and do maybe an easy one first. Let's go ahead and start with Show and Tell. What specific cards are going to be pretty bad against Show and Tell? I'll tell you right now that these Galvanic Discharges really aren't going to hold their weight against Show and Tell. Cards that are maybe suboptimal. I think that Swords to Plowshares and Static Prison are getting suboptimal against them. Static Prison was the classic tech against Show and Tell. They would cast the card Show and Tell, put Omniscience into play, you would put a Static Prison into play, but realistically their decks are actually built to beat that nowadays. So you don't necessarily rely on that anymore, though having some removal for Atraxa is pretty good, so we'll make this orange. We probably want to cut a lot of these cards, but not all of them. I would also go ahead and say that Goblin Bombardment isn't necessarily needed against them. And I'm also going to say Deathrite Shaman is really slow. We're playing Deathrite Shaman as a concession to some of the Strip Mine decks. We don't necessarily want that in our deck when we're going to be playing against combo. In fact, I actually might red Deathrite Shaman. I think it's just really, really slow against them, and I would much rather be playing just about anything else. So Dark Ritual combo decks. All right, pretty similar, right? Oh, I actually redded the wrong card here. My bad. I was supposed to be Deathrite Shaman in red. If I make a mistake while do this, or I say something, don't take this as gospel. Things about the meta can change, and I can make an honest mistake, right? So when we're up against Dark Ritual combo, Ragavan is a bit less good because often they will have blockers. A lot of Dark Ritual combo decks will play their silly Treasure Dorks or Barkish Bowmasters. Obviously, it depends on the build. In fact, let's actually put it in that other color. I have yellow for swap around depending on the build. So Ragavan, maybe you can cut him. I would say, again, Deathrite Shaman is probably a little too slow. Goblin Bombardment, again, I would say it's on the slow side. You don't necessarily need Goblin Bombardment when you are against creature or against not-in-creature decks. If you don't need to control the board. Obviously, this leads to really explosive kills with a Johnny, but I would rather have interaction if I have good interaction. But this card's not terrible, so I could keep it in, which is why it's in the orange category, not the red category. Against Dark Ritual combo, they do play like Sorin Alenda a lot of the time. Again, there's no like super solidified list for the best Dark Ritual combo deck right now. I'm just helping you guys tech for ladder, right? So a lot of these decks are similar enough. We can maybe make this the yellow colored. If they don't have Sorin Alenda, you can feel free to get rid of this stuff. And this card's probably not good enough to fight Sorin Alenda, never, so we can just go ahead and make it red. Alright, so against Golgari midrange, what is and isn't good enough? I'll say Ragavan's not good enough. They're going to have a million ways to kill it, a million ways to block it. A lot of these decks are starting to play Orcish Bowmasters, so forget about it, right? Bombardment is pretty mid. If we can't think of a better card, we can go ahead and take it out. Sword Splashers is going to be exceedingly good against them, as will be Juggernaut Peddler. I was testing this matchup a bunch, and I found that being able to discard their One Rings and Culling Rituals was really key. So we're going to want that. Swords, I didn't say why it's good, but it's removal for their creatures. If they spend a Dark Ritual trying to power out a Goyf and you just Dark Ritual it, it's a real feel-bad moment for them. It's an actual 2-for-1. Side Prison as well, it's just generic universal removal, also hits their One Ring. Discharge is pretty good, but it might struggle to kill their really big threats, so like maybe orange, maybe yellow. We don't have to cut it, but it looks like the only obvious cut here is Ragavan, so maybe we will cut it because we don't have that many cards to cut. However, we haven't thought about the cards that we want to bring in yet, right? So we'll see exactly how much we end up having. Okay, against Fair Blue, it depends on the build, if they're playing Bowmasters or not, whether or not I would bring Ragavan in. I would say, let's actually change this from Fair Blue to like UBX tempo, just so like it's clear what we're talking about. This guy is playing Shieldback, he's playing Orcish Bowmasters. I don't want to play Ragavan against that guy. You're red. Deathrite Shaman I think is going to be okay. In fact, it's a card that will stay in play and keep generating value. I think Deathrite Shaman is actually quite a good shout against this deck, especially the versions that are trying to play Strip Mine themselves. Bombardment has always been like okay against their deck, but never great. Maybe orange category, maybe yellow. Doesn't really... we can debate this all day. Static Prison. It is a good way to answer something like a Flip Tameo, but sometimes it's hard to maintain the energy when you're up against these decks and games go long. But otherwise, I like having a lot of interactions because we want the cheap interaction for their creatures. If they're a really creature-light build, I can see also making this yellow category. But we definitely want all the swords, we definitely want all the discards. Right, Mardu Mirror, we love this stuff, right? Ragavan can be quite bad. Sometimes I do a play draw split, but at the end of the day, he just gets blocked and removed so often that I don't keep him in. Deathrite Shaman, again, is also, like, just okay. You can make this yellow, make this orange. I'm not sure quite how to evaluate this. I'll have to play a bunch more. Bombardment is like an S tier card in the mirror matchup, though, so Keep that in. Swords, all these cards are really good in the mirror too. The only one that's a little less good is Peddler. We'll go ahead and call it yellow. But I think it's definitely better than trying to play Ragavans and Deathrite Shamans. But if we have a lot of removal to bring in, then I could see wanting to play less discard. All right, sweet. So now we've gotten to this point where we have a bunch of reds, bunch of oranges, bunch of yellows. So you never really want to play red cards. So what we can actually do is we can start to delete them and knock them out. And you can see the numbers up here have started to go down. We want to ideally get these numbers back to 60, and we want to start adding sideboard cards. Right, so I went ahead and added the cards that are currently in my sideboard. You don't have to have firm cards here. You could put a bunch of cards that you maybe want to have in your sideboard. Like, for example, a maybe card that could be in my sideboard but isn't right now is Portable Hole. So we can include it in this for the sake of completeness and see whether or not we can actually squeeze Portable Holes into our sideboard for the example. So now I'm actually going to delete this 14 here, and our goal is to get this number back up to 74 by, for example, adding some copies of these cards. We're not going to add the copies yet. We're going to do that at the end. Instead, we're just going to play ideals. Okay, ideally, in an ideal universe, what would I like to have against a bunch of these decks? So if I'm against Show and Tell, this is a good one to start with. Everybody knows this. Deafening Silence in my sideboard, I want 4 copies of it. It's just that simple. Thoughtseize, I want 4 copies of it. It's just that simple, right? Disruptor Flute, I would consider also playing 2 to 4 copies of Disruptor Flute against Show and Tell. I think doing 4-4-4 would be a little bit excessive. At that point, we start diluting our strategy, but I could definitely see doing this. So we're now at 64, so we're going to make some room, right? Maybe we trim a Goblin Bombardment. Maybe we get rid of most of our swords. We're back down to 60. This isn't an exact science. We're going to come back and we're going to keep tweaking these numbers because the goal here is to find a balance. We want all of these numbers to be happy. We need all these numbers to be 60. We need this number to be 75. Oh, and the important thing is that when I add 4 cards here, we need to add it here. In fact, a good way to do this is to use the maximum function in your spreadsheet. So now you could set that up to be max of this whole thing. And by the way, I have another Flex Core card here in my sideboard, Chthonian Nightmare. I used to main deck this a bunch. It's currently in the sideboard. It's good in like mid-rangey matchups, but I don't want to play it against combo. I don't want to main deck it in the Strip 9 meta. Okay, so now you could see if I were to, for example, just like start adding 4, 4, 4 of everything, we're going to get way above our allotted cap of 74. So we're going to need to iterate through this to make all of our numbers happy. But let's go ahead and do the rest of the decks, right? So against Golgari midrange, playtesting it, I found that discard's actually pretty mandatory. We're going to play 4 Thoughtseize here. It might not seem intuitive that the Dark Ritual midrange deck is something you should Thoughtseize. I would think that I would want to play white removal, and I would want to just swords everything. But actually, the only cards that really matter in the matchup are the One Ring and Culling Ritual, and you need to prevent them from resolving. So we're going to play maximum discard here. And possibly, arguably, you want to flute their One Ring. Flute their One Ring, flute Culling Ritual are things that I would want to do. And I believe how I was sideboarding last night when I was testing it is I actually cut my bombardments. I'm looking at this one more time. Oh yes, another thing I did is I went up to 4 prisons in my sideboard and got rid of the discharges. I might start doing 4 prisons banned again, and in fact, we need this maximum function here. Actually, we could put the maximum function everywhere, and it'll work. Except we cut it there. Okay, beautiful. All right, so we've done this. We're back up to 60 over here. We're nice and happy. Dark Ritual combo. What do we want against Dark Ritual combo? We want our silences, we want our Thoughtseizes, we want our flutes. I think it's actually going to be like the same sideboarding as Show and Tell in this meta, which is interesting. Is there another way to do it? No, I think it is actually going to be the same sideboarding as Show and Tell in this meta. So we can go ahead and trim some cards. So like, again, this is one that I made like build dependent. We can do that. I'm not sure if I'm in love with getting rid of Ragavan. When I first did this and made this yellow, I kind of thought of like Jetstorm and how it used to play a bunch of dorks. Necrostorm, how it plays a bunch of blockers, still plays those dorks. But that's not every single Dark Ritual deck on ladder. There's plenty like Belcher that play absolutely nothing, and Ragavan is pretty free against them. So I guess that'll be a bit up to you, the viewer. I mean, that's why we have this label to swap around depending on the build, right? If you see that you're against a version where Ragavan is really free, then maybe you want to do this, right? So don't take this as gospel. Let's go ahead and have it I know people are going to copy this, so I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want people to be dead to Sora and Alenda, so let's go ahead and say this, though that's not an exact science. We're back up to 60 here. That's the important part. We're going to come back and tweak these numbers again anyway, like I said before. All right, blue-black tempo. All right, we do want 4 Orcish Bowmasters against them. That's like the best card ever printed for fighting against this deck. I would also probably play Portable Hole. Like, I would rather play that over the Prisons. So let's go ahead and do this. Yeah, this seems pretty reasonable. We can also go down to 1 of these. Maybe we can ask for 3 Portable Holes for Christmas, and maybe we'll get them. The mirror match. Ooh, we love the mirror matches. I would love to cut all of these and play 4 Portable Holes. What else would we want? We would also probably want 4 Bowmasters. And then this is like ideal mirror sideboarding, in my opinion. Okay, sweet. So we actually did that. Oh, Chthonian Nightmare too. Yeah, I want like 2 copies of that. Over 2 Portable Holes. Since we're playing Discharge now. Oh, and Static Prison is really good. Oh, we got Static Prison back, right. So I probably want 4 copies of that again if we're considered playing 4 elsewhere. And I guess this is a good segue into the consolidation phase, right? So I've already established what cards I would theoretically want to play, but you can see here 81 is way higher than 74. That's our target. It's usually 75, it's 74 because we're playing Lars. So we're gonna have to be real with ourselves and realize, okay, we can't play 4 Portable Holes. Instead, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna play 4 Static Prisons, since we're already playing them in other matchups. And a good way to figure out what cards should be kept and what aren't, sum all of these, and then you have the number of times total that the card has appeared. And then to kind of normalize it a little bit, you can go ahead, you don't have to do this part, but you go ahead and divide it by like the count of decks that we have over here. So this means that we're playing 4 copies every single time. 4.0 is going to be the maximum here, and then if we drag this down and we delete the extra numbers that aren't needed, we divide by 0. Oh, of course, we need some $signs. Silly me. And then we divide this down. There we go. Get rid of these extra numbers. Beautiful. And then we go ahead and make this like 2 decimal places because I'm gonna lose it if it's more than 2 decimal places. There we go. Okay, so now you can see how much we're actually using each card and whether or not they're like warranted to be in the deck. So actually, like, Chthonian Nightmare is only at 0.3. We're only using it in 1 matchup. And Goblin Bombardment is actually like barely being used as well, only 1.2 copies on average. It's interesting. Makes me want to not play it. So if we look at our outliers for which ones we're using the least in our ideal case, it's Chthonian Nightmare, it's Goblin Bombardment, Portable Hole, Disruptor Flute, Discharge. Okay. And we have to make room, right? Hold on, get the zeros out of here. Get it out. Beautiful. So let's go ahead and say we delete Nightmare. Deleted. We're getting closer to 74. We need to put the 2 cards back. We got to put them back somewhere. We just established that we can't have more Portable Holes because this number is pretty low. So I'm going to actually put like some Deathrite Shamans back in the deck. Oh, right. We're able to play 4 Static Prisons. Forgot about that. Yeah, we can just put the 4 Static Prisons back in. So we did decide on that. Okay, we still have a couple more cards to cut. Unfortunately, Portable Hole is the only one that's under 1.0, so it's also going to get taken out back and shot, which means that we're going to end up playing Static Prison against Tempo, which is not like super ideal, but I'm also not going to be very upset about it. I'm not going to beat myself up. It's not like really bad. But then in the mirror match, we do have 2 slots where we're going to want to play something a little suboptimal, right? We're going to either play Ragavan or play Deathrite Shaman, or maybe play like extra discard. So what we can do is maybe we could do like a play draw split of Ragavans and Deathrite Shamans in the mirror. That's a little hard to read, but what that 1/1 here means that we're playing 2 total copies of them. When we're on the play, it's going to be 2-0, and then when we're on the draw, it's going to be 2-0. We're just putting 1 of each just to kind of average it out. Okay, we're still all at 60. We're at 76. We would need 1 more theoretical cut. We can cut Disruptor Flutes, we can cut Orcish Bowmasters, or we can cut Discharges, or we can cut Deafening Silences. And I believe the decision that I made for my current build of the sideboard is just to go down on silences. Because if you check here, we already have a lot of interaction for combo. We have a lot of ways to interact with them, right? So we might not necessarily need these silences. We're already packing like 8 discard. We have a bunch of like removal spells here that we could play against these decks, but we're kind of pulled out of playing. We have cards like Ragavan that we might as well play 4 copies of. So I went down to 2 copies of Deafening Silence. So now we can play all 4 Ragavans here. Honestly, Ragavan's fine. I don't know why I said it wasn't fine before. It's a great card. Play Ragavan. And then against Show and Tell, we just, I don't know, maybe we play the 4 Prisons. It's going to be a little suboptimal. We could also maybe, if we wanted to, we could play 2 Bowmasters just to get on the beatdown. We could play 2 Deathrite Shamans if we decide against it, or if we decide for it. But I did mark it as bad. But it's really up to you. I think we're very close. And really, we're just trying to hammer out what that last card is. So I don't want to bore you guys for the tutorial. I want to keep this at a reasonable time span. Let's say, where are we at? 22 minutes? It's like perfect, actually. So I'm going to leave it off here. What I would do from here is I would, well, first of all, mull over these last cards in something like Show and Tell, but then I would also just like keep expanding this to the right. And then I would keep writing down matchups as I encounter them on ladder, and I decide that they're worth sideboarding for. So like, for example, you could do Affinity, and then you go ahead and honestly, how I like to do is I just delete everything. And then I just start going again. Either you could start from the main deck by copying this over, or you could just start from nothing and try to get up to 60 cards to include here. And then if you have Affinity, you're going to want a card like Meltdown in your sideboard. So you can go ahead and say, okay, against Affinity, I want 4 Meltdown. But the problem is that even if you really want 4 Meltdown against Affinity, note that this number here is still really low, which means we're probably going to want to cut the card from our sideboard entirely. All right, food for thought. I hope this was a really fun and useful tutorial. I hope this makes sense. Hope this was a good way to explain the spreadsheet to everybody. Hopefully the spreadsheet seems a lot less opaque. I've made spreadsheets like this before and shown people, and they're always like taken aback that I put together a spreadsheet over Magic cards of all things. But this is the way I personally map sideboards and how I've always done it, so hopefully this helped you out.